When a mysterious woman walked up to the gates of Fort Granite and refused to show her ID, nobody could have predicted that within hours, 6 Black Hawk helicopters would thunder across the Montana sky just for her. What started as a routine security stop would unravel into one of the most shocking revelations in modern military history. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning mist clung to the rolling hills of eastern Montana like a shroud, obscuring the distant peaks and casting Fort Granite in an ethereal gray light. Staff Sergeant Diego Morales adjusted his tactical vest against the October chill as he watched the unmarked sedan pull up to the main security checkpoint. Nothing unusual about civilian vehicles approaching the base. Contractors, delivery drivers, and government officials made their rounds daily. What made him pause was the woman who stepped out. She moved with a fluidity that caught his attention immediately, not the hurried shuffle of someone running late for an appointment, nor the nervous energy of a first-time visitor to a military installation. This was something else entirely. Controlled, deliberate, the kind of movement that suggested years of training had made efficiency second nature. Iris Thorne stood approximately 5'7", with dark auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail that revealed sharp cheekbones and alert hazel eyes. Her clothing was unremarkable: dark jeans, a black wool coat, and worn leather boots that had clearly seen considerable use. No visible jewelry, no unnecessary accessories. Everything about her appearance suggested someone who valued function over form. "Good morning, ma'am," Diego called out as she approached the checkpoint booth. "I'll need to see your identification and any base access documentation you might have." Corporal Beth Nguyen looked up from her computer terminal, instinctively straightening in her chair as the woman came into view. Beth had been working security at Fort Granite for 2 years, long enough to develop an intuition about people who didn't quite fit standard categories. This woman triggered that intuition immediately. Iris stopped precisely 3 feet from the checkpoint window, close enough for conversation, far enough to avoid appearing threatening. Her hands remained visible at her sides, a detail that registered with both security personnel as either very smart or very trained. "I won't be showing identification today," she said quietly. Her voice carried clearly despite its low volume, with no trace of regional accent or emotional inflection. It was the kind of voice that suggested careful training in remaining unremarkable. Diego blinked, certain he'd misheard. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I need to see some form of ID. This is a restricted military facility." "I understand," Iris replied, her expression unchanged. "But I won't be providing identification at this time." Beth's fingers hovered over her keyboard as she processed what she was hearing. In her experience, people who refused to show ID fell into predictable categories: confused civilians who didn't understand military protocols, protesters looking to make a statement, or individuals with outstanding warrants who feared arrest. None of those categories seemed to fit the calm woman standing before them. "Ma'am," Diego continued, his voice taking on the patient but firm tone he'd perfected for difficult situations. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to return to your vehicle while we sort this out. Standard procedure requires that I detain any unidentified individuals until we can verify their purpose here." For the first time since her arrival, Iris's expression shifted slightly. Not concern or fear, but something that might have been approval, as if Diego had just passed some sort of test by following proper protocol. "I'll wait wherever you think is appropriate," she said, stepping back from the checkpoint with the same measured precision she'd shown throughout the encounter. As Diego reached for his radio to call for the watch commander, he found himself studying the woman more carefully. Her coat was expensive but not flashy, the kind of quality outerwear that suggested both good taste and practical needs. Her boots showed wear patterns consistent with extensive walking on varied terrain, not just city sidewalks. And there was something about the way she held herself, a readiness that reminded him of soldiers he'd served with in active combat zones. "Control, this is Gate 7. I have an uncooperative civilian requesting base access without identification, requesting watch commander response for detention and processing." Copy, Gate 7. Watch Commander en route. Maintain visual contact with the subject. Beth watched through the reinforced glass as Iris walked calmly toward the designated waiting area near the security building. Most people in similar situations would be pacing, checking their phones, or showing signs of agitation. Iris simply stood quietly. Her gaze moved methodically across the base's visible infrastructure with what looked like professional assessment. "Diego," Beth said quietly, "look at how she's studying the perimeter." Diego followed Beth's gaze and felt his pulse quicken slightly. Iris wasn't looking around with the casual curiosity of a civilian. Her attention moved systematically from the guard towers to the communication arrays, from the vehicle barriers to the personnel flow patterns. It was the kind of visual reconnaissance that suggested either threat assessment or security evaluation. Within minutes, Lieutenant Ryan Cross jogged over from the administrative complex, his breath forming small clouds in the cold morning air. Fresh out of the officer candidate school and barely 3 months into his assignment at Fort Granite, Cross still carried himself with the rigid formality of someone working hard to prove he belonged. "What's the situation?" he asked, slightly winded from his quick response. "Civilian female, mid-30s, arrived in an unmarked sedan and refuses to provide identification. Claims she doesn't need base access documentation, but won't explain her purpose here. She's been cooperative with detention, but won't answer direct questions about her identity or business." Cross looked toward the waiting area where Iris stood with the same patient stillness she'd maintained since her arrival. In his limited experience, this scenario wasn't covered in any of the training manuals he'd studied. Hostile infiltrators were supposed to fight or run when discovered. Confused civilians were supposed to explain themselves or demand to speak with supervisors. This woman was doing neither. "Has she made any threats or demands?" Cross asked. "Negative, sir. She's been polite and cooperative, just completely unwilling to identify herself or explain why she's here." Cross approached Iris with what he hoped was appropriate authority mixed with professional courtesy. "Ma'am, I'm Lieutenant Cross, watch commander for this facility. I understand you're having some difficulty with our security requirements."
Iris looked at him with the same steady attention she'd shown the gate guards. "No difficulty, Lieutenant. I understand your requirements perfectly. Then perhaps you could help me understand why you're unable to provide identification." For a long moment, Iris was quiet, her gaze shifting to the mountains visible in the distance beyond the base perimeter. When she spoke again, her voice carried a subtle weight that hadn't been present during her earlier responses. "Sometimes, Lieutenant, the most important security measures are the ones that don't appear in your standard operating procedures." The cryptic response left Cross feeling off balance. In his training, people either followed protocol or they didn't. There wasn't supposed to be a middle ground where someone could be both cooperative and completely uncooperative at the same time. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to accompany us to the security office for formal processing. Without identification, I cannot allow you to remain in this area." Iris nodded and began walking toward the security building, with the easy compliance of someone who had expected exactly this outcome. As they walked, Cross noticed details that his initial assessment had missed. Her posture suggested physical fitness beyond casual exercise, the kind of conditioning that came from serious training. Her awareness of her surroundings was constant but subtle, taking in information without appearing to stare. Most tellingly, she showed no signs of the anxiety or frustration that typically accompanied detention. Instead, she moved with the patient confidence of someone who knew that current circumstances were temporary and would resolve in her favor. As they entered the security building, Cross couldn't shake the feeling that he was following a script written by someone else, playing a role in a drama whose conclusion had already been determined. The women walking beside him knew something he didn't, and that knowledge gave her a calmness that made him increasingly uneasy. The holding area was sparse but comfortable. A few chairs, a table, and a window that provided a view of the main compound. Iris took a seat and folded her hands in her lap, settling in as if she had all the time in the world. Cross found himself staring at her, trying to reconcile her civilian appearance with the military bearing that became more apparent the longer he observed her. Something about this situation was very wrong, but he couldn't identify what it was or how to address it. Outside, the morning mist was beginning to lift, revealing the full scope of Fort Granite's operations. Personnel moved between buildings with the purposeful efficiency of a well-run military installation, unaware that their routine day was about to take a dramatic and unexpected turn. In the distance, barely audible over the everyday sounds of base activity, the faint rumble of approaching aircraft could be heard on the horizon.
The security office at Fort Granite had hosted its share of unusual situations over the years, but Lieutenant Cross had never dealt with someone quite like Iris Thorne. She sat in the holding area with an almost meditative stillness, her hands folded, her breathing steady, showing none of the fidgeting or agitation that typically accompanied detention. Cross reviewed the standard protocols in his mind. Unidentified civilians were supposed to be processed through a predictable sequence: identification, verification, background checks, contact with sponsors or supervisors, and either clearance or removal from the premises. The system worked because it assumed people wanted to resolve their situation as quickly as possible. Iris seemed to operate outside those assumptions entirely. "Ma'am," Cross began, taking the chair across from her, "I need to understand what brings you to Fort Granite today. Without that information, I can't help resolve the situation." She looked at him with those steady hazel eyes, and for a moment, Cross felt like he was being evaluated rather than conducting an evaluation. "I'm here because I need to be here," she said simply. The response was simultaneously truthful and completely unhelpful. Cross felt his frustration building, not at her uncooperative attitude — she wasn't being hostile or difficult — but at his own inability to apply standard procedures to someone who didn't fit standard categories. "That's not really an answer, ma'am. Are you here on official business, personal business? Are you trying to contact someone on base?" "I'm here to prevent something from happening." The cryptic response sent a chill down Cross's spine. In the current security environment, any mention of preventing incidents triggered immediate alarm protocols. "Ma'am, are you telling me you have knowledge of a potential threat to this facility?" Iris was quiet for a long moment. Her gaze shifted to the window that overlooked the main compound. Personnel moved between buildings in their usual patterns, unaware that their routine day might be about to change dramatically. "Lieutenant, how long have you been stationed here?" The question caught Cross off guard. 3 months. Why? "Have you noticed anything unusual about your communication systems lately? Any irregularities in data flow, timing discrepancies, or equipment malfunctions that your technical staff couldn't quite explain?" Cross felt his pulse quicken. There had been several minor glitches over the past few weeks, nothing serious enough to warrant major concern, but enough to generate repair orders and diagnostic reports. How could a civilian know about internal technical issues? "How would you have knowledge of our internal systems?" he asked, his voice taking on a sharper edge. "Because I know what to look for." Before Cross could respond, Staff Sergeant Morales appeared in the doorway. "Sir, we've completed the vehicle search. No contraband, no weapons, but there's something you should see." Cross followed Morales to the evidence processing area, where Iris's belongings had been laid out on a metal table. Her purse contained typical civilian items: wallet, keys, phone, but also several pieces of equipment that looked distinctly non-standard. A small device that resembled a modified smartphone, but with additional ports and connections, a compact tablet with a ruggedized case and what appeared to be specialized software. Most concerningly, a metal case about the size of a paperback book sealed with a biometric lock that none of them could identify. Sir, Morales said quietly, this equipment doesn't match anything in our civilian contractor database. The specifications suggest government-grade electronics, but we can't access any of it without proper authorization codes. Cross stared at the devices, feeling pieces of a puzzle beginning to form a picture he didn't like. Civilian contractors didn't carry biometric locked cases. Tourists didn't have ruggedized tablets with specialized software, and random visitors certainly didn't have knowledge of internal base communication systems. Has she said anything about the equipment? Cross asked. Claims it's personal property and that we don't have the clearance to examine it further. The audacity of the statement would have been almost amusing if it hadn't carried undertones that suggested she might be right. Cross returned to the holding area, where Iris remained in the same position, unchanged by the search of her possessions. Ma'am, we've examined your belongings, and frankly, they raise more questions than they answer. That equipment isn't standard civilian issue. No, it isn't. Are you going to explain what it is? When the appropriate personnel arrive. Cross felt his jaw clench. I am the appropriate personnel. I'm the watch commander for this facility. Iris looked at him with what might have been sympathy. Lieutenant, you're a good officer following proper procedures, but this situation requires authorization levels that aren't available at the installation level. The implication was clear and infuriating. She was suggesting that his authority wasn't sufficient to handle whatever was happening. More troubling, she was suggesting that she knew what authorization levels would be required, which meant she understood military hierarchy better than most civilians had any reason to.
Ma'am, I need you to understand that making cryptic statements about threats to military installations is a federal crime. If you have specific information about security risks, you need to share that information immediately. I understand the legal implications, Lieutenant. I also understand that there are protocols for handling situations like this that supersede normal detention procedures. Cross felt like he was trying to navigate a conversation where only one participant knew the rules. Every response Iris gave was technically cooperative while being practically useless. She answered his questions without providing information, acknowledged his authority while implying it was insufficient. What protocols are you referring to? The kind that will become relevant very soon. As if summoned by her words, Cross's radio crackled to life. Lieutenant Cross, report to the commander's office immediately. Bring the detained civilian with you. Cross looked at Iris, who showed no surprise at the summons. If anything, she looked like someone whose carefully calculated timeline was proceeding exactly as planned. How did you know that was coming? He asked as they prepared to leave the holding area. Because I know how these things work, Lieutenant, and because the people who sent me here are very good at their jobs. The walk to the commander's office gave Cross time to process what he'd heard. Someone had sent her. She wasn't acting alone or following some personal agenda. This was beginning to look like an official operation, but one so classified that the people being protected from it weren't cleared to understand what was happening. Colonel Amanda Price had been running Fort Granite for 18 months, long enough to develop strong instincts about situations that didn't fit normal parameters. When she'd received the call about an uncooperative civilian, her first assumption had been a routine security issue that her watch commander could handle with standard procedures. The follow-up reports had changed that assumption entirely. As Cross escorted Iris into her office, Price immediately noticed details that painted a different picture than the initial reports had suggested. The woman's posture, her awareness of her surroundings, her complete lack of anxiety about being detained, none of it matched the profile of a confused civilian or potential troublemaker. Ma'am, Price said, maintaining formal protocol while studying Iris carefully. I'm Colonel Price, commanding officer of this installation. I understand you've been reluctant to provide identification or explain your presence here. That's correct, Colonel. Would you care to change that now? Iris looked at Price with the same steady evaluation she'd shown throughout the morning, but Price caught something different in her expression, a subtle shift that suggested she was finally dealing with someone who might have the authority to understand what was happening. Colonel, what I can tell you is that your communication systems have been compromised and the breach is active right now. Every minute we spend on identification protocols is another minute of operational intelligence being extracted from your systems. Price felt the room temperature drop several degrees. Communication breaches were the kind of security failures that ended careers and triggered congressional investigations. Explain. Your technical staff has been reporting minor glitches and timing discrepancies over the past 3 weeks. Those aren't equipment malfunctions. They're masking techniques being used to hide unauthorized data extraction. Cross looked between the two women, feeling like he was watching a conversation conducted in a language he didn't understand. The civilian who had seemed so mysterious and uncooperative was suddenly speaking with technical precision about classified systems. "How would you have knowledge of our internal communication issues?" Price asked, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to getting direct answers. "Colonel, because stopping this kind of breach is what I do, Colonel. And because the people who are targeting your facility made one critical mistake. They didn't account for someone like me being here to notice their work." Outside the office windows, the morning sun had burned away the last of the mist, revealing Fort Granite in sharp detail. Personnel continued their routines, unaware that their commanding officer was learning about a security breach that threatened not just their base, but potentially the broader military communication network. Price reached for her secure phone, but Iris spoke before she could dial. "Colonel, before you make that call, you should know that the cavalry is already on the way."
Colonel Amanda Price had commanded Fort Granite through budget cuts, personnel rotations, and the occasional security incident, but nothing in her 18-month tenure had prepared her for a conversation with someone who seemed to know more about her base's operational status than she did. Iris Thorne sat across from her desk with the calm composure of someone delivering a weather report rather than announcing a potential national security breach. "What cavalry?" Price asked, her hand still hovering over the secure phone. "The kind that responds when military communication networks are compromised by hostile intelligence operations," Iris replied. "They should be arriving within the hour." Price felt her stomach tighten. In her experience, federal responses that arrived without prior coordination meant situations had escalated far beyond local command authority. "Are you telling me this facility is under active surveillance by foreign operatives?" "I'm telling you that your communication systems have been systematically penetrated by people who understand military protocols well enough to make their intrusion look like routine technical difficulties." Lieutenant Cross, who had been listening to this exchange with growing bewilderment, finally spoke up. "Colonel, should I initiate lockdown procedures?" Price considered the question carefully. Premature security alerts could disrupt critical operations and create panic among personnel. But if there was genuine substance to Iris's claims, delay could result in continued intelligence compromise. "Not yet, Lieutenant, but I want all department heads to report any unusual technical issues from the past month, any glitches, timing problems, or equipment behavior that didn't fit normal patterns." As Cross left to coordinate the information gathering, Price turned her full attention to Iris. "I need more than cryptic warnings. If you have specific intelligence about threats to this installation, you need to share that information immediately." Iris reached into her jacket pocket, moving slowly to avoid triggering any defensive reactions from the security personnel. She withdrew a small device that looked like a modified tablet and placed it on Price's desk. "This is a signal analysis unit. It's been monitoring electromagnetic emissions from your base since I arrived this morning. Would you like to see what it's detected?" Price nodded, and Iris activated the device. The screen displayed a complex array of wavelength patterns, frequency analyses, and data flow charts that looked like something from a technical manual. "Your communication systems are operating normally," Iris continued, highlighting specific portions of the display. "Too normally. Real-world signals always contain minor variations, atmospheric interference, hardware fluctuations, processing delays. When everything appears perfectly consistent, it usually means someone is working very hard to make it appear that way." The explanation sent a chill through Price's understanding of her base's security. She'd received weekly briefings on communication status, and everything had been reported as functioning within normal parameters.
If Iris was correct, those reports had been systematically falsified. "How long has this been going on?" Price asked. "Based on the pattern analysis, approximately 3 weeks. The intrusion started small, minor timing adjustments that would be dismissed as routine variations, but the scope has been expanding systematically. They now have access to operational schedules, personnel movements, and cargo manifests." Price reached for her phone, but Iris held up a hand. "Colonel, if you use standard communication channels to report this, you'll be transmitting through the same compromised systems that are being monitored. Anything you say will be intercepted and could trigger immediate data purging by the hostile operators." The tactical implications were staggering. If their communication systems were compromised, standard security protocols would actually worsen the situation by alerting the intruders to discovery. Price felt like she was navigating a minefield where every step could trigger an explosion. "What do you recommend?" she asked. "We wait for the response team that's already en route. They'll have the equipment and authorization necessary to isolate the breach without alerting the operators to our awareness of their activities." Staff Sergeant Morales appeared in the doorway carrying a tablet with what appeared to be inventory reports. "Colonel, you asked for technical anomaly reports from department heads. We're getting some interesting patterns." Price gestured for him to continue, and Morales began reading from his tablet. "Communications reports 3 instances of timing lag over the past 2 weeks, all dismissed as atmospheric interference. IT logged 4 equipment diagnostic cycles that returned normal results despite user-reported irregularities. Vehicle maintenance documented 2 GPS tracking glitches that corrected themselves before technicians could investigate."
Iris nodded as if the reports confirmed something she'd already suspected. Classic masking techniques. The intrusion operators need processing time to filter and modify data before returning it to your systems. The lags and glitches are evidence of that processing, but they're being kept just below the threshold that would trigger major investigation. Price studied the reports, seeing patterns she'd missed when each incident was considered in isolation. Individual technical problems were routine and expected, but a coordinated series of minor anomalies across multiple systems suggested something far more serious. "How sophisticated is this operation?" she asked. "Military-grade equipment, advanced technical knowledge, and enough operational intelligence to target your specific vulnerabilities," Iris replied. "This isn't opportunistic hacking. Someone invested significant resources in penetrating your systems while maintaining operational security." The secure phone on Price's desk rang, startling everyone in the room. She looked at Iris, who nodded toward the phone. "Answer it, Colonel. But remember that this conversation is likely being monitored." Price picked up the phone, maintaining professional composure despite her growing concern. "Colonel Price?" "Colonel, this is General Victor Stone, Northern Command. I need you to prepare for immediate federal coordination regarding a security matter at your facility. A specialized response team is en route and should arrive within 30 minutes. Price felt pieces of a complex puzzle suddenly clicking into place. The mysterious civilian who'd appeared at her gate, the technical anomalies her staff had been reporting, and now a general she'd never spoken with coordinating a federal response to a situation she'd just learned about. "Yes, sir. Should I implement any specific security measures in preparation?" "Maintain normal operations, but restrict access to communication systems. The response team will provide further guidance upon arrival." As Price ended the call, she looked at Iris with new understanding. "You're not a random civilian who stumbled onto a security problem." "No, Colonel, I'm not." "Are you going to tell me who you actually are?" Iris was quiet for a moment, considering her response. "Someone who specializes in identifying and countering exactly this type of electronic intrusion. Someone who's been tracking this particular operation for several weeks." "And you couldn't have identified yourself immediately because?" "Because if I had announced my presence and credentials, the hostile operators monitoring your communications would have known their operation was compromised. They would have initiated data purging and evacuation procedures, eliminating evidence and escaping with whatever intelligence they had already collected." Price understood now why the morning had unfolded with such careful orchestration. Iris hadn't been uncooperative. She'd been protecting an ongoing counterintelligence operation, by allowing herself to be processed through routine security procedures while specialized response teams position themselves for coordinated action. So the detention, the mysterious equipment, the cryptic responses, all of that was intentional? All of that was necessary to maintain operational security while confirmation and response assets were moved into position. Lieutenant Cross returned to the office, carrying additional reports from department heads across the base. Colonel, we're finding technical anomalies in almost every communication-dependent system. Nothing dramatic individually, but when you look at the patterns, it paints a picture of coordinated electronic surveillance, Price finished. Lieutenant, I want you to implement Communication Protocol 7 immediately. Cross looked confused. Ma'am, I'm not familiar with that protocol. It's not in your standard manual. It's for situations where normal communication channels may be compromised. Switch all critical communications to hardline connections and face-to-face briefings only. As Cross left to implement the unusual orders, Price turned back to Iris. What happens next? Now we wait for people with the proper equipment and authority to isolate this intrusion and trace it back to its source. And we hope that the operators haven't detected our awareness of their activities. Outside the office windows, the midday sun cast sharp shadows across the Fort Granite compound. Personnel move between buildings in their usual patterns, unaware that their routine communications were being systematically monitored by hostile intelligence operators. But in the distance, barely audible over the everyday sounds of base activity, the rumble of approaching helicopters was growing steadily louder.
Technical analyst Maya Singh had been staring at the same diagnostic screen for 20 minutes, trying to understand why Fort Granite's communication logs looked flawless when everything else felt fundamentally wrong. The data streams showed perfect timing, the network traffic followed predictable patterns, and every system diagnostic returned green across the board. But perfection in electronic systems was like silence in a combat zone, usually a warning sign rather than a comfort. When Lieutenant Cross appeared at her workstation with urgent orders from the colonel, Maya's first instinct was to close the classified screens she'd been reviewing. Then she noticed his expression, tense and focused in a way that suggested this wasn't routine technical support. Singh, Colonel Price needs immediate analysis of all communication anomalies from the past month, Cross said, his voice carrying unusual urgency. Any glitches, timing irregularities, or diagnostic inconsistencies that didn't fit standard patterns. Maya pulled up her incident tracking database, scrolling through weeks of routine maintenance logs and user reports. Sir, we've had several minor issues, but nothing that triggered major concern. Most of them resolved themselves before we could complete full diagnostics. Show me everything, even the incidents that seemed insignificant. As Maya compiled with data, a pattern began emerging that made her stomach tighten. Individual glitches that had seemed random and unrelated suddenly appeared coordinated when viewed together, timing delays in communication traffic, diagnostic cycles that returned normal results despite persistent user complaints, and equipment behavior that defied technical logic. Lieutenant, she said slowly, these incidents don't make sense when considered as isolated technical problems. But if someone were trying to mask unauthorized access to our systems? Cross leaned over her shoulder, studying the timeline Maya had created. Explain what you're seeing. Communication systems don't naturally develop timing lags that correct themselves. Network equipment doesn't perform perfectly during diagnostics while malfunctioning during normal operation, and GPS tracking systems definitely don't develop intermittent errors that resolve without intervention. The implications were staggering. Maya had been treating each incident as a routine technical issue, following standard troubleshooting procedures that assumed equipment problems rather than deliberate interference. If Cross was suggesting what she thought he was suggesting, her diagnostic protocols had been completely inadequate for the actual threat. How long would it take for someone to establish this kind of systematic access? Cross asked. Maya considered the question carefully. Weeks, maybe months. They'd need detailed knowledge of our system's architecture, access to specialized equipment, and enough time to test their intrusion methods without triggering security alerts. And what kind of information could they extract once they had that access? Everything that moves through our communication networks: personnel schedules, operational orders, cargo manifests, coordination with other facilities. If they've been monitoring us for 3 weeks, they probably know more about our current activities than most of our own staff. Cross's radio crackled with Colonel Price's voice. Lieutenant, report to Conference Room A immediately. Bring Analyst Singh with you. As they walked toward the administrative building, Maya found herself reviewing everything she thought she knew about network security. Her training had focused on protecting against external attacks and internal breaches, but always with the assumption that hostile activity would be detectable through standard monitoring protocols. If someone could make their intrusion look like routine technical variations, her entire defensive framework was essentially useless. Conference Room A had been cleared of all personnel except those with the highest security clearances. Colonel Price sat at the head of the polished table, her expression grim as classified documents were spread before her. Beside her sat the mysterious woman who had been detained earlier, no longer looking like a confused civilian, but rather someone with intimate knowledge of exactly the kind of threat Maya had just identified. Analyst Singh, Price said, meet Dr. Iris Thorne, Defense Intelligence Agency. She's been tracking the operation that's been targeting our systems. Maya felt her understanding of the morning's events undergo a complete reorientation. The uncooperative civilian who had refused identification was actually a federal agent, working to protect the same systems Maya had been trying to secure. Dr. Thorne, Price continued, I'd like you to explain to Analyst Singh exactly what we're dealing with. Iris activated her tablet, displaying the same complex signal analysis that had shocked Price earlier. Your systems are being monitored by a sophisticated electronic intelligence operation. They've established real-time access to your communication networks while making their presence look like routine technical variations. Maya studied the readouts, recognizing patterns that aligned perfectly with the anomalies she'd been documenting. This is military-grade surveillance equipment. The signal processing capabilities required for this kind of operation aren't available to civilian hackers. Correct. We're dealing with state-level resources and advanced technical knowledge. The operators understand American military protocols well enough to exploit our standard diagnostic procedures. Price leaned forward. What's their ultimate objective? Intelligence collection on a massive scale, Iris replied. Fort Granite isn't their only target. They've been systematically penetrating military communication networks across multiple installations, building a comprehensive picture of operational capabilities and activities. Maya felt the scope of the threat expanding beyond anything she'd imagined. How many facilities are compromised? At least 7 that we've identified, possibly more. The operation has been running for months, collecting data that could compromise ongoing missions and endanger personnel worldwide. Lieutenant Cross, who had been listening with growing concern, finally spoke. Why target logistics bases like Fort Granite? We're not involved in combat operations or classified research. Because logistics bases coordinate everything else, Iris explained. You process supply schedules, personnel transfers, and communication traffic for operations spanning half the continent. Someone with access to your data could predict military movements, identify vulnerable targets, and potentially interfere with critical missions. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Maya realized that every routine communication, every standard procedure, every piece of information that moved through their networks had potentially been compromised. The scope of the intelligence breach was staggering. Current threat level? Price asked. Active and ongoing, Iris replied. They're extracting data in real time, which means they have immediate awareness of any changes in base operations or security posture. If we use standard communication channels to coordinate response, they'll know about it immediately. Maya understood now why the morning had unfolded with such careful orchestration. Standard security protocols would have triggered immediate alerts through compromised communication systems, allowing the hostile operators to destroy evidence and escape with whatever intelligence they'd collected. What equipment do they need for this kind of operation? Maya asked.
Iris displayed additional technical specifications on her tablet. Mobile command and control center, probably vehicle-mounted, sophisticated signal processing equipment, multiple antenna arrays for comprehensive coverage, and personnel trained in military communication protocols.
So they're operating from somewhere within range of our communication systems? Almost certainly. Electronic surveillance requires line-of-sight access to many of our networks. They're probably positioned within a few miles of the base perimeter. Price reached for her secure phone, but Iris held up a hand. Colonel, if you use that phone, you'll be transmitting through potentially compromised channels. We need to maintain communication security until the response team arrives. What response team? Maya asked. Before anyone could answer, the sound of approaching helicopters became unmistakably clear through the conference room windows. Multiple aircraft, flying in formation, approaching Fort Granite from the south. Iris checked her watch with the precise timing of someone following a carefully coordinated schedule. The response team that's been positioning assets while we identified and contained the threat. Maya looked out the window, seeing aircraft configurations she didn't recognize approaching the base. Not routine transport helicopters, but specialized command and control platforms designed for complex operations. "How long have you been planning this?" Price asked. "Long enough to coordinate federal resources while maintaining operational security," Iris replied. "The morning's events weren't improvised, Colonel. They were carefully orchestrated to give us time to confirm the threat and position response assets without alerting the hostile operators." The helicopters were clearly visible now, approaching in tight formation with the precision that suggested military rather than civilian operation. Maya counted 6 aircraft, far more than would be needed for routine transport helicopters or evidence collection. "Dr. Thorne, what happens when they realize we've discovered their operation?" "They'll try to purge their systems and evacuate their equipment before we can trace the intrusion back to its source, which is why timing is critical. We need to isolate their operation and capture their equipment before they can destroy evidence." Colonel Price stood and walked to the window, watching the approaching helicopters with the expression of someone seeing months of routine operations transformed into a national security crisis. "What are my orders?" "Maintain normal base operations while specialized personnel neutralize the threat. Your staff has done everything correctly by identifying anomalies and following security protocols. Now it's time for people with specific counterintelligence training to take over." The lead helicopter was beginning its final approach to the base landing zone, followed closely by the others. Maya could see personnel moving with purposeful efficiency, preparing for operations that would determine whether months of intelligence gathering would be stopped or succeed. Outside, Fort Granite continued its routine activities, unaware that the next few hours would determine whether their communications remained secure or compromised on a scale that could affect military operations nationwide.
The 6 Black Hawk helicopters touched down on Fort Granite's main landing zone with military precision, their rotors creating a whirlwind of dust and debris that forced everyone on the tarmac to shield their eyes and take cover. Colonel Price watched from her office window as specialized personnel unloaded equipment from the helicopters, electronic surveillance gear, mobile command centers, and communication arrays that looked far more sophisticated than anything Fort Granite normally hosted. This wasn't a routine federal investigation. This was a major counterintelligence operation. Dr. Iris Thorne stood beside her, no longer the mysterious civilian who had appeared at the gate that morning, but clearly revealed as someone with intimate knowledge of federal counterintelligence operations. Her calm demeanor throughout the day's events now made perfect sense. She hadn't been waiting for bureaucratic processes to resolve her detention. She'd been waiting for precisely this moment. "Colonel," Iris said, checking her secure communication device, "I need to brief you on my actual identity and mission before the response team takes operational control." Price turned from the window, understanding that everything she thought she knew about the morning's events was about to undergo another fundamental revision. "I'm listening." "My name is Dr. Iris Thorne, Defense Intelligence Agency, Counter-Electronic Surveillance Division. I've been tracking this particular intelligence operation for 6 weeks, following their signature across multiple military installations." The revelation hit Price like a physical impact. A federal agent had been operating on her base for hours, while she'd treated the situation as a routine security issue. Why didn't you identify yourself immediately? Because the operation targeting Fort Granite was still active, and any official federal response would have triggered immediate data purging and equipment evacuation by the hostile operators. We needed them to maintain their surveillance activities while we positioned assets for coordinated interdiction. Price felt pieces of a complex puzzle finally forming a complete picture. So your detention, the mysterious equipment, the refusal to provide credentials, all of that was intentional? All of that was necessary to maintain operational security while confirmation and response assets moved into position. If I'd announced my federal credentials at the gate, your communication systems would have transmitted that information directly to the people we're trying to catch. Lieutenant Cross appeared in the doorway, slightly out of breath from running across the compound. Colonel, the helicopter teams are requesting immediate coordination with base leadership. They say they have federal authority to assume operational control of a counterintelligence situation. They do, Price confirmed. Lieutenant, implement Communication Protocol 7 across all departments, all critical information exchanges through hardline connections or face-to-face briefings only. As Cross left to coordinate the unusual orders, Price turned back to Iris. What exactly are we dealing with? Iris activated her analysis equipment, displaying the same sophisticated readouts that had shocked Price earlier, but now she provided context that transformed technical data into operational intelligence. A coordinated electronic surveillance operation targeting 7 military installations across the western United States. They've been systematically extracting operational intelligence for approximately 4 months, building a comprehensive picture of military capabilities and activities. 4 months? Price felt her blood run cold. How much information could they have collected? Personnel schedules, supply manifests, operational coordination, communication protocols, essentially everything that moves through your networks. They now have enough intelligence to predict military responses, identify vulnerable facilities, and potentially interfere with ongoing missions. Maya Singh, who had been quietly processing the technical implications, finally spoke. Dr. Thorne, the sophistication of this operation suggests state-level resources. Are we dealing with foreign intelligence services? That's what we intend to find out. The equipment signatures and operational methods suggest professional intelligence gathering, but we haven't been able to identify the specific actors until now.
The team that just arrived represents coordinated response from Defense Intelligence, NSA, and FBI counterintelligence, Iris continued. We've been tracking this operation across multiple states, waiting for an opportunity to locate and neutralize the source. And Fort Granite provided that opportunity? Fort Granite was their most recent target, and your technical staff's documentation of anomalies gave us the evidence we needed to confirm active surveillance. More importantly, your base's geographic isolation makes it an ideal location for interdiction operations. Colonel Price walked back to the window, watching as the specialized teams established what appeared to be a temporary command center on her landing zone. What happens to my base operations during this interdiction? Normal activities continue, but all external communications are monitored and filtered through federal equipment to prevent intelligence leakage. The hostile operators can't be allowed to detect our response until we've located and neutralized their collection equipment. Staff Sergeant Morales appeared in the doorway with a tablet displaying real-time base status reports. Colonel, department heads are asking about the helicopter deployment and the communication protocol changes. How should I respond? Tell them we're conducting a planned federal coordination exercise. Normal operations, but all external communications through designated channels only. As Morales left, Iris's secure device chimed with an incoming message. She read it quickly, her expression shifting to something that might have been satisfaction mixed with concern. They've located the hostile surveillance platform, she announced. Mobile command vehicle positioned approximately 2 miles northeast of the base perimeter. Professional setup, military-grade equipment, and what appears to be real-time data processing capability. How long have they been operational? Maya asked. Based on the equipment configuration, probably the entire 3-week period we've been tracking anomalies. They established surveillance, confirmed access to your systems, and have been systematically extracting intelligence while maintaining operational security. Price felt the scope of the security breach expanding beyond anything she'd imagined.
Are other bases similarly compromised? 6 confirmed installations with potential additional targets we haven't identified yet. This represents the most sophisticated electronic intelligence operation against U.S. military facilities in recent memory. The implications were staggering. If hostile intelligence had systematic access to military communication networks, operational security for missions worldwide could be compromised. Personnel could be at risk, mission planning could be predictable, and the fundamental assumption that military communications were secure could be false. What's the response plan? Price asked. Coordinated interdiction designed to capture equipment, personnel, and intelligence without allowing data destruction or operator escape. The teams that just arrived will establish electronic isolation around the hostile platform, while specialized personnel conduct physical interdiction. Through the windows, they could see additional aircraft approaching from the west. Not helicopters this time, but fixed-wing aircraft that suggested even more federal resources being deployed. The scope of the response was beginning to match the magnitude of the threat. Dr. Thorne, Lieutenant Cross said, returning with updated status reports, the federal teams are requesting immediate coordination with base leadership for operational planning. They say timing is critical. It is, Iris confirmed. Electronic surveillance operations include escape protocols. The longer we delay, the higher the probability that the hostile operators will detect our response and initiate emergency data purging. Colonel Price gathered her command staff, understanding that her routine day had transformed into a situation that would likely affect her career, her base, and potentially national security for years to come. The mysterious woman who had appeared at her gate without credentials was about to lead an operation that could prevent a catastrophic intelligence breach. "What do you need from us?" Price asked. "Operational support while specialized personnel neutralize the threat. Your staff identified the anomalies that confirmed this operation. Now it's time for people with counterintelligence training to finish what you started." Outside, the federal response teams were already moving with the coordinated efficiency of professionals who had been planning this moment for weeks. The game of electronic hide-and-seek was about to end, and Fort Granite was about to discover whether months of systematic surveillance would be stopped or succeed in compromising military operations on a massive scale.
General Victor Stone emerged from the lead Black Hawk with the kind of command presence that made 30 years of military protocol snap into place around him. Unlike the typical visiting dignitaries Fort Granite occasionally hosted, Stone wore field fatigues instead of dress uniform, and his gray hair showed the disheveled look of someone who had been coordinating operations from aircraft command centers rather than comfortable offices. Colonel Price felt her stomach drop as she recognized the 3 stars on his collar. Generals of Stone's rank didn't make unannounced visits to logistics bases unless something had gone catastrophically wrong or was about to go catastrophically wrong. The federal response that had seemed impressive from her office window suddenly looked like preparation for a major military operation. Dr. Iris Thorne stepped forward as Stone approached the administrative building, her earlier civilian disguise completely abandoned in favor of professional coordination with obvious superior officers. The transformation was remarkable. The mysterious woman who had appeared at the gate now moved with the confident authority of someone accustomed to briefing senior military leadership. "General Stone," she said, offering a crisp salute that Stone returned with equal precision. "Situation confirmed and contained. Hostile surveillance platform located and isolated. No indication of operator awareness regarding federal response." "Status of the base communications?" Stone asked, his voice carrying the kind of authority that expected immediate and accurate answers. "Compromised for approximately 3 weeks, but systematic data extraction ongoing until 40 minutes ago when we implemented electronic isolation protocols. Base personnel identified anomalies and maintained operational security throughout the investigation." Stone turned his attention to Colonel Price, who had been watching this exchange with growing understanding that her routine command had become the focal point of a major counterintelligence operation. "Colonel Price, I'm General Stone, Northern Command Cyber Operations. Your facility is now under temporary federal coordination for a national security matter." The formal language made the situation's gravity unmistakable. Federal coordination meant her command authority was suspended while specialized personnel handled threats beyond normal base security capabilities. "Yes, sir. What do you need from my staff?" Continued normal operations while specialist teams neutralized the electronic intrusion. Your personnel did exemplary work identifying and documenting system anomalies. That documentation provided the evidence we needed to confirm active surveillance. Lieutenant Cross appeared beside them, carrying status reports and looking like someone trying to process events beyond his training or experience. General, sir, the federal teams have established command and control operations on the landing zone. They're requesting base schematic and communication infrastructure specifications. Stone nodded toward one of the specialists who had emerged from the helicopters. Colonel Martinez will coordinate with your technical staff. Full access to system specifications and operational protocols. Time is critical. As Cross left to coordinate the information transfer, Stone turned back to Dr. Thorne. Intelligence assessment. Sophisticated operation, military-grade equipment, advanced knowledge of American communication protocols. They've been systematically extracting operational intelligence from multiple installations while maintaining perfect operational security. Multiple installations? Price asked, feeling the scope of the threat expanding beyond anything she had imagined. 7 confirmed bases, Colonel Stone replied grimly. Your facility was their most recent target, but they've been building a comprehensive intelligence picture of Western Sector military operations for approximately 4 months. The implications hit Price like a physical blow. 4 months of operational intelligence could compromise ongoing missions, endanger personnel, and provide hostile actors with detailed knowledge of American military capabilities and procedures. What's the source? She asked. That's what we're about to find out, Stone said. The surveillance platform we've located represents the kind of sophisticated operation that requires either foreign state resources or domestic actors with access to classified technology. Maya Singh approached the group carrying a tablet displaying technical analysis that had been coordinated with the federal response teams. General, Dr. Thorne, we've completed preliminary assessment of the electronic intrusion techniques. The sophistication level suggests advanced training and specialized equipment.
Stone examined Singh's analysis, his expression growing more serious as he reviewed the technical specifications. This represents one of the most sophisticated electronic intelligence operations we've encountered against military installations. The coordination required, the technical knowledge demonstrated, and the operational security maintained suggest professional intelligence services. Dr. Thorne activated her secure communication device, receiving real-time updates from the teams that had been positioned around the hostile surveillance platform. Sir, interdiction teams report the target is a modified recreational vehicle with military-grade electronic equipment, professional installation, multiple antenna arrays, and what appears to be real-time data processing capability. Personnel count? Thermal imaging suggests 3 to 4 individuals inside the vehicle. No indication they've detected our presence, but they're maintaining active surveillance of base communications. Stone checked his watch with the precise timing of someone coordinating multiple operational elements. How long until we can initiate physical interdiction? Electronic isolation is complete. Physical teams are positioned. We can proceed on your authorization. Colonel Price watched this exchange, understanding that decisions made in the next few minutes would determine whether months of intelligence gathering would be stopped or succeed in compromising military operations nationwide. The federal response that had seemed overwhelming was beginning to look appropriately scaled for the magnitude of the threat. General, she said, what are the broader implications if this operation succeeds? Stone was quiet for a moment, considering how much classified information to share with someone whose security clearance might not cover the full scope of the threat. Colonel, if hostile intelligence has systematic access to military communication networks, every operation planned using standard protocols could be compromised. Personnel safety, mission security, and fundamental operational assumptions about communication security would all be at risk. The weight of the statement settled over everyone present. Military operations worldwide depended on the assumption that classified communications remained secure from foreign surveillance. If that assumption was false, the entire framework of operational security would need to be rebuilt. Dr. Thorne, initiate interdiction protocols. I want that equipment captured intact and personnel detained for federal investigation. No data destruction, no evidence elimination, and no operator escape. Yes, sir.
Thorne spoke into her secure device, coordinating with teams that had been positioned around the hostile surveillance platform for the past hour. Through her office windows, Price could see additional federal personnel establishing what appeared to be a comprehensive command and control operation. Electronic warfare specialists, communication analysts, and federal agents working with equipment she didn't recognize. The scoop of the response was beginning to match what she now understood about the magnitude of the threat. Colonel Price, Stone said, I want you to understand that your base personnel's identification and documentation of system anomalies probably prevented a catastrophic intelligence breach. Most facilities miss the kind of subtle indicators your staff recognized. What happens after the interdiction? Complete security overhaul, new protocols, enhanced training, and systematic verification that other facilities haven't been similarly compromised. This operation represents a new level of threat that requires new defensive approaches. Staff Sergeant Morales appeared with updated status reports from across the base. General, Colonel, federal teams report all systems secured and ready for coordinated response. Base operations continuing normally with external communications isolated. Stone nodded, understanding that the coordination he'd been planning for weeks was finally ready for execution. Dr. Thorne, authorize interdiction. Let's find out who's been systematically compromising American military communications. As Thorne coordinated the final phase of the operation, Price realized that Fort Granite would never return to routine logistics operations. The base that had been quietly supporting military operations across the western United States had become the focal point of a counterintelligence operation that would reshape how the military approached communication security. The mysterious woman who had appeared at their gate without credentials was about to lead an operation that could determine whether American military communications remained secure or compromised on a scale that threatened national security. Outside, specialized teams were already moving toward targets they had been watching for hours, preparing to end an electronic intelligence operation that had been systematically extracting military secrets while maintaining perfect operational security.
The modified recreational vehicle sat innocuously beside a cluster of pine trees approximately 2 miles northeast of Fort Granite, positioned to appear like just another camping setup in Montana's vast wilderness. To casual observers, it looked like outdoor enthusiasts taking advantage of public land access. To the federal surveillance teams that had been watching it for the past hour, it represented one of the most sophisticated mobile intelligence platforms they had ever encountered. Dr. Iris Thorne crouched behind electronic monitoring equipment in the temporary command center, coordinating the final phase of an operation she had been planning for weeks. Her earpiece crackled with updates from surveillance teams positioned around the hostile platform, each report confirming what she had suspected since identifying the electronic signature at Fort Granite. Alpha Team, visual confirmation on the target vehicle, came the first report. Professional antenna configuration, multiple satellite communication arrays, and what appears to be significant power generation capability hidden beneath civilian exterior. Bravo Team. Thermal imaging confirms 4 individuals inside the vehicle. Active on communication equipment, no indication of awareness regarding federal presence. General Stone stood beside the command displays, watching as real-time intelligence painted a picture of an operation far more sophisticated than typical electronic surveillance. The equipment visible through specialized imaging suggested military-grade capabilities disguised as recreational vehicle modifications. Dr. Thorne, Stone said, assessment of their operational security. Excellent until now, she replied, studying the tactical displays. They've maintained perfect cover while systematically extracting intelligence from multiple installations. The only reason we detected them was through technical analysis of timing anomalies that most facilities would dismiss as routine equipment variations. Colonel Martinez, the federal specialist coordinating with Fort Granite's technical staff, approached with analysis that confirmed their worst suspicions.
General, equipment signatures match specifications for foreign intelligence platforms. This isn't domestic surveillance. We're dealing with hostile foreign operatives. The revelation transformed the situation from potential security breach to confirmed foreign intelligence operation on American soil. Stone's expression hardened as he processed implications that extended far beyond Fort Granite to national security concerns that would require immediate coordination with multiple federal agencies. Dr. Thorne, initiate electronic isolation protocols, Stone ordered. I want their communication capabilities severed before we move to physical interdiction. Iris coordinated with specialists operating jamming equipment that had been quietly positioned around the target vehicle. Within minutes, the hostile platform would be electronically isolated, unable to transmit collected intelligence or coordinate with external handlers. Maya Singh, monitoring the operation from Fort Granite's communications center, watched as sophisticated federal equipment began implementing electronic countermeasures she had never seen before. Her screens showed systematic disruption of signals that had been invisibly extracting intelligence from base systems for weeks. Dr. Thorne, she reported through secure channels, base communication systems are showing immediate improvement in timing consistency. Whatever they were doing to our networks, it's being neutralized in real time. Confirmed, Maya. Electronic isolation protocols are working. The hostile platform can no longer extract data from your systems or coordinate with external operations. Lieutenant Cross, who had been observing the federal operation with fascination and growing understanding of how far beyond routine security the situation had evolved, received updated orders from Colonel Price. All department heads maintain normal operations but prepare for potential communication system resets. Federal specialists are implementing security enhancements. Staff Sergeant Morales coordinated across the base, ensuring that routine military activities continued while specialized personnel conducted operations that would determine whether months of systematic intelligence gathering would be successfully interdicted or allowed to compromise military operations nationwide.
Alpha Team, target vehicles showing signs of activity, came the report that everyone had been expecting. Increased personnel movement, equipment activation, possible preparation for emergency procedures. Bravo Team confirms they're detecting our electronic countermeasures and initiating what appears to be data purging protocols. The tactical situation was developing exactly as Iris had predicted. Professional intelligence operations included contingency plans for discovery, typically involving immediate destruction of collected data and rapid evacuation of personnel and equipment. The race was now between federal interdiction teams and hostile operators trying to eliminate evidence. All teams moved to interdiction positions, Stone ordered. No data destruction, no equipment damage, no personnel escape. This operation ends now. Through secure communication channels, Colonel Price monitored the coordination of federal assets that had been positioning around Fort Granite for hours. The scope of the response was finally becoming clear. This wasn't just about stopping one surveillance platform. This was about capturing intelligence that could reveal the full extent of foreign operations against American military installations. Charlie Team, we have visual on personnel attempting to exit the target vehicle, 2 individuals moving toward what appears to be secondary transportation. Delta Team, blocking secondary escape routes, all exit paths covered. Dr. Thorne coordinated the complex operation with the calm precision of someone who had been planning every contingency. Her earlier mysterious behavior at the base gate now made perfect sense. She had been coordinating federal positioning while maintaining operational security that prevented the hostile operators from detecting imminent interdiction. Dr. Thorne, General Stone said, what's the probability of successful evidence capture? Hi, sir. Electronic isolation protocols have prevented data transmission, surveillance teams confirm no evidence destruction, and interdiction teams are positioned to prevent personnel or equipment escape.
Maya Singh, watching from her technical position, saw the culmination of the most sophisticated electronic warfare operation she had ever witnessed. Federal equipment was systematically reversing weeks of systematic intelligence extraction while simultaneously preventing the hostile operators from destroying evidence of their activities. Target vehicle secured, came the report everyone had been waiting for. 4 individuals in federal custody, electronic equipment intact, no evidence destruction detected. Mobile intelligence platform captured with full operational capability preserved. The success of the interdiction meant that federal investigators would have access not only to the equipment used against Fort Granite, but potentially to intelligence collected from multiple installations and evidence of the broader operation targeting American military communications. Colonel Price felt a mixture of relief and concern as she processed the implications. The immediate threat to her base had been neutralized, but the discovery of sophisticated foreign intelligence operations against military installations would trigger security reviews and protocol changes that would affect every facility in the command structure. General Stone, she asked, what happens next? Complete analysis of captured equipment and intelligence, identification of other compromised installations, and systematic security enhancements to prevent similar operations in the future. Your base just became the focal point of the most significant counterintelligence success in recent memory. Dr. Thorne was already coordinating the complex process of transporting captured equipment and personnel for federal analysis. The mobile intelligence platform that had been systematically extracting military secrets would now provide evidence of foreign intelligence capabilities and potentially reveal additional operations that hadn't been detected. Colonel Price, she said, your staff's identification of system anomalies and professional response to unusual circumstances prevented what could have been a catastrophic intelligence breach. Most facilities would have missed the subtle indicators that led to this successful interdiction. Lieutenant Cross, processing the transformation of his routine security duties into participation in a major counterintelligence operation, understood that Fort Granite would never return to its previous quiet logistics role. The base had become a symbol of successful defense against sophisticated foreign intelligence gathering. As federal teams began the complex process of evidence collection and prisoner transport, the scope of the morning's events was becoming clear. What had started with a mysterious woman refusing to show identification had evolved into the successful interdiction of a foreign intelligence operation that threatened American military security on a massive scale. The electronic warfare that had been conducted invisibly for weeks was finally over, with American counterintelligence capabilities proving superior to foreign intelligence gathering techniques. But the broader implications of what had been discovered would reshape military communication security for years to come.
The modified recreational vehicle that had masqueraded as innocent camping equipment for weeks revealed its true nature once federal specialists began their systematic examination. What appeared from the outside to be a standard RV with solar panels and satellite television capability was actually one of the most sophisticated mobile intelligence platforms the Defense Intelligence Agency had ever encountered on American soil. Dr. Irish Thorne stood beside the captured vehicle, coordinating the evidence collection process with the methodical precision of someone who understood that every component, every data file, and every piece of equipment could provide crucial intelligence about foreign operations targeting American military installations. The 4 prisoners sat in federal custody vehicles nearby, their professional composure suggesting training and counter-interrogation techniques that would make extracting information a lengthy process. General Stone examined the vehicle's interior through the open side door, his expression growing more serious as he observed the extent of the electronic surveillance capabilities. Banks of computer equipment, multiple communication arrays, and signal processing hardware that represented millions of dollars in sophisticated technology, all designed to penetrate and monitor American military networks. Dr. Thorne, Stone said, preliminary assessment of their capabilities. Military-grade electronic intelligence gathering,
real-time data processing, and multi-target surveillance capability, she replied, reading from reports being compiled by technical specialists. This single platform could simultaneously monitor communications from multiple installations while maintaining the processing power to filter and analyze extracted intelligence. Colonel Martinez approached with a tablet displaying the initial analysis of captured equipment. General, we've identified signal processing hardware that matches specifications for foreign military intelligence services. The sophistication level confirms this was a state-sponsored operation. The revelation that they had interdicted a foreign government intelligence operation on American soil added layers of diplomatic and security implications that extended far beyond Fort Granite. Stone understood that the captured evidence would require coordination with multiple federal agencies and potentially trigger diplomatic responses. Maya Singh, who had been transported to the interdiction site to provide technical analysis, stared at the equipment array with professional fascination mixed with concern. Dr. Thorne, the processing capability they've installed could handle data extraction from dozens of installations simultaneously. Fort Granite may have just been one small part of a much larger operation. That's our assessment as well, Iris confirmed. The equipment we've captured represents the kind of investment that suggests systematic intelligence gathering against American military communications on a massive scale. Lieutenant Cross, observing the evidence collection process, found himself trying to comprehend how routine security procedures at his base had uncovered what appeared to be one of the most significant foreign intelligence operations in recent memory. Dr. Thorne, how long would it take to establish this kind of sophisticated surveillance capability? Months of planning, specialized equipment procurement, personnel training, and careful positioning to avoid detection by standard security protocols. This wasn't an opportunistic operation. Someone invested significant resources in systematic intelligence gathering against American military communications. Staff Sergeant Morales, who had been coordinating base security during the interdiction, received updated reports from the technical teams examining captured equipment. General, specialists report communication intercept hardware contains data storage with information from multiple military installations. They're requesting priority analysis authorization. Stone nodded grimly, understanding that the captured intelligence could reveal the full scope of foreign operations against American military facilities. Authorized. I want complete analysis of all stored data, communication logs, and operational procedures. This evidence could prevent additional intelligence breaches at installations we haven't identified. Colonel Price, monitoring the operation from Fort Granite's command center, received real-time updates about the sophistication of the captured platform. The scope of the threat that had been targeting her base was becoming clear. This wasn't just about Fort Granite's communication security. This was about systematic foreign intelligence gathering that could compromise military operations nationwide. Dr. Thorne, what's the assessment of intelligence compromise at my installation? Significant but contained. They had access to your communication networks for approximately 3 weeks, which means operational schedules, personnel movements, and coordination with other facilities were potentially compromised. However, the interdiction prevented transmission of the most recently collected intelligence.
The technical specialists examining the mobile platform's data storage systems provided updates that painted a picture of systematic intelligence gathering across multiple states. Communication intercepts, operational schedules, and personnel information from installations throughout the Western Command structure, all organized and processed with professional efficiency. General Stone, reported the lead technical analyst, preliminary data recovery suggests intelligence collection from at least 12 military installations over a 4-month period. The scope of the operation exceeded our initial estimates. Stone felt the implications of that revelation settling over him like a weight. 12 installations meant potential compromise of operational security affecting thousands of military personnel and dozens of ongoing missions. The successful interdiction at Fort Granite might have prevented a catastrophic intelligence breach that could have affected American military operations worldwide. Status of the prisoners? Stone asked.
Professional operatives trained in counter-interrogation techniques, reported the federal agent coordinating their detention. Initial questioning suggests they're prepared for extended interrogation without cooperation. However, the captured equipment may provide more intelligence than prisoner interviews. Dr. Thorne coordinated with specialists who were systematically documenting every component of the sophisticated surveillance platform. Each piece of equipment, every data file, and all communication logs would be analyzed to build a comprehensive picture of foreign intelligence capabilities and identify additional operations that might still be active. Dr. Thorne, Maya Singh said, studying the technical specifications of captured communication equipment, the signal processing algorithms they were using suggest they had detailed knowledge of American military communication protocols. This level of understanding typically requires either insider information or extensive previous intelligence gathering. The implication that foreign intelligence services might have systematic knowledge of American military communication procedures added another layer of concern to an already complex security situation. If hostile actors understood American protocols well enough to exploit them systematically, the entire framework of military communication security might require fundamental revision. General, Iris reported, evidence recovery is complete. Mobile platforms secured for transport to federal analysis facilities. Technical teams estimate several weeks will be required for complete intelligence assessment. Stone understood that the successful interdiction marked the beginning rather than the end of a complex counterintelligence investigation. The captured evidence would need to be analyzed, additional compromised installations would need to be identified, and new security protocols would need to be developed to prevent similar operations in the future. Colonel Price, he said through secure communication, your installation will require complete communication system overhaul and enhanced security protocols. The threat we've interdicted represents a new level of sophistication that requires new defensive approaches. As federal teams prepared to transport the captured equipment and prisoners for detailed analysis, the scope of the morning's events was becoming fully clear. What had started with a mysterious woman refusing to show identification had culminated in the successful interdiction of a foreign intelligence operation that threatened American military security on an unprecedented scale. The electronic surveillance that had been conducted invisibly for months was finally ended, but the captured evidence would provide intelligence analysts with insights into foreign capabilities and methods that would influence American security procedures for years to come. Dr. Iris Thorne, no longer the mysterious civilian who had appeared at Fort Granite's gate, stood beside the captured intelligence platform with the satisfaction of someone who had successfully completed one of the most significant counterintelligence operations in recent memory. The careful orchestration that had seemed like uncooperative behavior during the morning's events had culminated in the successful neutralization of a threat that could have compromised American military operations worldwide. The battle of electronic intelligence gathering was over, with American counterintelligence capabilities proving superior to foreign surveillance techniques. But the war for communication security would continue, informed by lessons learned and evidence captured during the successful operation at Fort Granite.
2 weeks after the interdiction at Fort Granite, Colonel Amanda Price sat in a secure briefing room at Pentagon headquarters, surrounded by intelligence officials whose security clearances extended far beyond anything she had previously encountered. The classified documents spread across the polished table painted a picture of foreign intelligence operations that had threatened American military security on a scale she was still struggling to comprehend. General Stone sat at the head of the table, his expression reflecting the weight of revelations that had emerged from analysis of the captured equipment and intelligence. Beside him, Dr. Iris Thorne presented findings that had transformed a single base security incident into one of the most significant counterintelligence successes in recent memory. The mobile platform captured at Fort Granite represents the most sophisticated foreign intelligence operation we've identified against American military installations, Dr. Thorne reported, activating displays that showed technical specifications beyond anything Price had imagined possible. Analysis of captured data reveals systematic intelligence gathering from 17 military installations over a 6-month period. Price felt the scope of the threat she had unknowingly been living with settling over her like a physical weight. 17 installations meant thousands of military personnel whose operational security had been compromised, dozens of missions whose planning might have been predictable to hostile intelligence, and a level of systematic surveillance that threatened fundamental assumptions about military communication security. What was the extent of intelligence compromise at my installation? Price asked, dreading the answer, but needing to understand the full implications for her personnel and operations. Significant but not catastrophic, Stone replied. They had access to your communication networks for 3 weeks, which means operational schedules, personnel movements, and coordination with other facilities were potentially known to foreign intelligence. However, the successful interdiction prevented transmission of the most recently collected data. Maya Singh, who had been promoted to senior technical analyst following her role in identifying the surveillance signatures, presented her analysis of the captured equipment's capabilities. Colonel, the processing power they deployed could handle real-time intelligence extraction from multiple installations simultaneously while maintaining sophisticated filtering to avoid detection by standard security protocols. The technical sophistication revealed in the captured equipment had shocked intelligence analysts who specialized in foreign surveillance capabilities. The mobile platform represented an investment of millions of dollars and months of planning, suggesting state-level resources dedicated to systematic intelligence gathering against American military facilities. Assessment of ongoing threat? Price asked. Contained but not eliminated, Dr. Thorne replied. We've identified and secured the specific operation that targeted Fort Granite, but the sophistication of their methods suggests this was part of a broader intelligence program. Additional operations using similar techniques may still be active at installations we haven't identified. Lieutenant Cross, who had been included in the Pentagon briefing due to his role in the initial detention and investigation, found himself trying to process how his routine security duties had evolved into participation in a national security matter of this magnitude. Dr. Thorne, what prevented us from detecting this operation sooner? She replied, the sophistication of their operational security. They understood American military protocols well enough to exploit our standard diagnostics procedures. Most facilities would have dismissed the timing anomalies and system variations as routine equipment issues. Colonel Martinez, who had coordinated the federal technical response, was providing updates on the systematic security enhancements being implemented across the command structure. All installations are receiving upgraded detection equipment and enhanced training in recognizing sophisticated surveillance techniques. The lessons learned at Fort Granite are being applied throughout the military communication network. The scope of the security overhaul triggered by the Fort Granite incident was staggering. New protocols, enhanced equipment, specialized training for personnel, and systematic verification that other facilities hadn't been similarly compromised. The successful counterintelligence operation had revealed vulnerabilities that required fundamental changes to military communication security.
What about the prisoners? Price asked. Federal custody, extended interrogation, diplomatic complications, Stone replied grimly. The captured operatives were professional intelligence officers from a foreign government, which means this incident has triggered diplomatic responses and international coordination regarding intelligence operations on American soil. The revelation that they had interdicted a foreign government operation added layers of complexity that extended far beyond military security to international relations and diplomatic consequences. Price understood that Fort Granite had become the focal point of a situation that would affect American foreign policy for years to come. Staff Sergeant Morales, who had been coordinating security during the entire incident, received recognition for his role in maintaining operational security while federal specialists conducted their investigation. Colonel, what changes should we expect at Fort Granite? Complete communication system overhaul, enhanced security protocols, specialized personnel training, and designation as a model facility for the new security standards being implemented across all installations, Price replied. Fort Granite will never return to routine logistics operations. Dr. Thorne, who had been coordinating the complex analysis of captured intelligence, provided updates on the broader implications of their successful operation. The equipment and data we captured has provided unprecedented insight into foreign intelligence capabilities and methods. This success will influence American counterintelligence approaches for decades. Maya Sim presented technical analysis that revealed the extent of foreign knowledge about American military communication protocols. The captured equipment contained detailed specifications for American systems that suggest either extensive previous intelligence gathering or access to classified technical documentation. The implication that foreign intelligence might have systematic knowledge of American military procedures added another dimension to the security concerns raised by the Fort Granite incident. If hostile actors understood American protocols well enough to exploit them systematically, the entire framework of military communication security required fundamental revision. Long-term implications? Price asked. New security paradigm based on the assumption that sophisticated adversaries understand our standard procedures and will attempt to exploit them, Stone replied. Enhanced detection capabilities, improved training for personnel, and systematic verification that communication networks remain secure from advanced surveillance techniques. General Stone stood and walked to the windows overlooking the Pentagon courtyard, where routine military activities continued while specialists worked to implement security enhancements triggered by the Fort Granite incident. Colonel Price, your installation's role in this success cannot be overstated. The professional response of your personnel to unusual circumstances prevented what could have been a catastrophic intelligence breach. The recognition felt both satisfying and sobering. Price understood that Fort Granite had been fortunate to have personnel who noticed subtle anomalies and followed proper protocols, but also that many other installations might not have been as observant or as lucky. Dr. Thorne, Price said, what happens to people like you? Where do specialists with your capabilities go after operations like this? Dr. Thorne gathered her classified materials with the same quiet efficiency Price remembered from their first meeting. Wherever the next threat requires this kind of response, Colonel. The successful operation at Fort Granite was significant, but the broader challenge of protecting American military communications from sophisticated foreign surveillance continues. As the briefing concluded and personnel began filing out, Price found herself reflecting on how dramatically her understanding of military security had evolved. The routine logistics base she had commanded for 18 months had become the focal point of a counterintelligence operation that revealed threats she had never imagined and capabilities she had never known existed. The mysterious woman who had appeared at Fort Granite's gate without credentials orchestrated one of the most significant counterintelligence successes in recent memory. But Price understood that similar threats probably existed at installations across the country, operated by people who understood American vulnerabilities better than Americans understood themselves. The battle for communication security would continue, but now it would be fought with better knowledge, enhanced capabilities, and systematic awareness of the sophisticated threats that targeted American military installations with patience, resources, and professional expertise that challenged every assumption about defensive security.
6 months after the interdiction at Fort Granite, Staff Sergeant Diego Morales stood in the upgraded security training facility, watching a new group of military personnel struggle with a simulation that would have seemed impossible before the Thorne incident. The exercise was deceptively simple in concept, but challenging in execution. Identify sophisticated electronic surveillance hidden within normal base operations using only subtle indicators and indirect evidence. Most of the trainees were failing. The key, Morales explained, pausing the simulation as frustrated students shook their heads at screens showing seemingly normal communication logs, is understanding that advanced threats don't announce themselves. They integrate. They use your own procedures and trust assumptions to mask hostile activities. Lieutenant Sarah Chen, recently transferred from a communications unit, raised her hand with the same confusion that had characterized everyone's initial encounter with sophisticated surveillance techniques. Sergeant, how do you investigate electronic intrusion without triggering the systems you're trying to protect? Morales activated a display showing the actual communication logs from Fort Granite during the weeks when Dr. Iris Thorne's operation had been developing. You look for patterns that are too perfect. Real systems have variations, inconsistencies, minor flaws. When everything appears exactly as it should be, that's usually when something is very wrong. The Advanced Counterintelligence Training Center had been established at Fort Granite specifically to address the kinds of threats revealed during the Thorne operation. Students came from installations across the country to learn detection techniques for electronic surveillance that exploited standard military protocols and trust relationships. Maya Singh, now promoted to Senior Technical Analyst and Chief Instructor for Electronic Warfare Detection, joined Morales at the front of the classroom. Her role in identifying the original surveillance signatures had made her one of the military's leading experts on sophisticated electronic intrusion techniques. The Thorne case taught us that our enemies study us as carefully as we study them, Singh explained to the attentive students. They understand our protocols, our assumptions, our standard responses to technical problems. Advanced surveillance operations are designed around exploiting those predictable patterns. She activated technical displays showing the actual equipment captured during the Fort Granite operation. This mobile intelligence platform represents an investment of millions of dollars and months of planning. The operators understood American military communication protocols well enough to make systematic intelligence extraction look like routine technical variations. Colonel Amanda Price, now commanding the training center in addition to her continued leadership of Fort Granite's enhanced security operations, observed the instruction session with the satisfaction of someone who had seen theoretical threats become real and then been successfully countered. Students, Price addressed the group, the most important lesson from the Thorne operation isn't technical. It's about trusting professional instincts even when standard procedures suggest everything is normal. The training program had become a model for military installations worldwide. Personnel learned to recognize subtle indicators, question perfect system performance, and coordinate responses to unusual situations that might represent sophisticated threats rather than routine problems. Lieutenant Cross, now a captain and specialist in counterintelligence operations, presented case studies from the broader investigation that had followed the Fort Granite success. The captured intelligence revealed systematic surveillance of 17 installations over 6 months. Most facilities missed indicators that, in retrospect, clearly showed foreign intelligence gathering. The scope of the threat that had been revealed continued to influence military security procedures. New detection equipment, enhanced training for personnel, and systematic verification protocols designed to identify surveillance techniques that exploited trust and routine procedures. "What happened to Dr. Thorne?" asked one of the students, voicing the question that came up in every training session. Price smiled, remembering the mysterious woman whose careful orchestration had prevented a catastrophic intelligence breach. Dr. Thorne continues her work with the Defense Intelligence Agency, presumably identifying and countering similar threats at other installations. People with her specialized capabilities don't retire. They move to wherever the next crisis requires their expertise.
The successful operation had become legendary within counterintelligence circles, studied as an example of patient, professional work that had prevented systematic foreign intelligence gathering from compromising American military operations. But it had also revealed vulnerabilities that required ongoing vigilance and enhanced defensive capabilities. Morales directed the students' attention to communication logs showing the timing patterns that had first indicated systematic surveillance. The lesson here isn't just technical. It's about maintaining skepticism toward systems that perform too perfectly and trusting trained personnel who notice things that don't fit expected patterns.
Singh added technical context that had emerged from months of analysis following the successful interdiction. Advanced electronic surveillance requires significant resources and sophisticated knowledge. The threats we face aren't opportunistic hackers. They're professional intelligence operations with detailed understanding of American military procedures. The Fort Granite Training Center had processed hundreds of military personnel in the months since its establishment, spreading knowledge and defensive capabilities throughout the command structure. The Fort Granite incident had revealed threats that probably existed at multiple installations, operated by adversaries who understood American vulnerabilities better than Americans had understood them themselves. Current assessment of ongoing threats? Asked Captain Martinez, a student whose own installation had recently experienced technical anomalies that might have indicated surveillance attempts. Continuous, Price replied honestly. The successful operation here demonstrated American capability to detect and counter sophisticated electronic surveillance. But it also revealed the extent of foreign intelligence interest in military communications. The threat environment has probably intensified rather than diminished. The sobering reality was that the Fort Granite success had likely prompted adversaries to develop even more sophisticated techniques, creating an ongoing cycle of threat evolution and defensive enhancement that would continue indefinitely. As the training session concluded, students prepared to return to their own installations with enhanced awareness of threats they had never imagined and capabilities they had never known they needed. The knowledge gained would be applied at bases across the country, improving security for thousands of military personnel. Dr. Iris Thorne's careful orchestration of the counterintelligence operation had prevented what could have been a catastrophic breach of American military communications. But perhaps more importantly, it had revealed the sophistication of threats that targeted military installations and the need for enhanced defensive approaches that assumed adversaries understood American procedures and would attempt to exploit them. Morales watched the students file out, understanding that each would return to their installations with knowledge that could prevent similar intelligence-gathering operations. The mysterious woman who had appeared at Fort Granite's gate without credentials had orchestrated not just a successful counterintelligence operation, but also a fundamental enhancement of American military security awareness. The battle for communication security continued, but now it was fought with better knowledge, better training, and better understanding of enemies who had proven themselves both sophisticated and persistent. The mysterious woman who had refused to show her ID had given American military security its most important lesson in decades. Trust your instincts, question perfect systems, and never underestimate adversaries who study you as carefully as you should study them.
Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.